Okay, I've counted to 10, so hopefully we are on. Sorry for the delay for our public who may be joining us. We had a bit of a hiccup with the conference line, but it should all be working now. So with that, I'd like to call the City of Mount Vernon City Council study session for November 4, 2020 to order. The time is now 6:12. We are going to start out. Item A is our public safety update. So I'll invite our fire chief, Brian Bryce, to start out with the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities information. Chief.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, just a quick update on our grant opportunity that came before us probably, I think first noticed it around the end of August. And this is through the FEMA system. So I'll have Peter put up some slides for me. If you'd share that site, Peter. Peter, we'll go back to the first slide there, if you would, please. That's the last slide. So as he's doing that, so just by way of a little slight background, if you all recall, back in May, I believe it was, we adopted our hazard mitigation plan that we put together over the last year along with the county. It's kind of a joint plan. We're under the umbrella of the county. Part of the reason behind that plan was to make it so that we're eligible for these types of grants. This is one of the criteria. You have to have a hazard mitigation plan in place to even be able to apply for this and outline some of the hazards or concerns you would have within your community that you're trying to address. So the funding opportunity opened up at the end of August. And with that, what it does is it allows it funding for states. And I use that term because what they call them applicants, but when you read the definitions of that, it's really just a couple different criteria. It's states are applicants, and then tribal communities are the other ones that are a separate piece associated with that. How the local communities factor into that is we're considered a sub-applicant under the state. So when we start talking about all of the money being awarded to the applicant, it would really go to the state, and then the state would then disperse that down to the sub-applicants underneath of that. The title of this specific grant is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC for short grant. They had approximately $500 million available for the total of this grant. Peter, if you want to go to the next slide there, please. So the way they have it down is they have it $33.6 million for the states and up to $600,000 per applicant. So again, our state would be eligible for up to $600,000, and then that $600,000 would be subdivided amongst whoever has as a sub-applicant with that. 20 million of that they set aside for the tribes, and then the remaining 446.4 million is under what they consider the national competition, and that would be then given out directly to those sub-applicants using the criteria that they have set out within that grant process, with a $50 million cap per sub-applicant under that. Next slide there, Peter. Why we're bringing this forward is a couple of reasons. One, there is definitely a cost share, and that's a 25% non-federal funding. They would cover 75% of those.
Not these lights.
Obviously, the small impoverished communities.
No, those out there.
Would be able to get a little bit more of that piece of that. And some of these funds can be used for some of the portion of the management funds. That's the administrative funds associated with kind of doing the project. The reason behind this is we're putting this in with regard to our stations and the recent needs assessment we did and the seismic issues that they have. And that directly fits under that hazard mitigation as a concern for us. It fits within the criteria of what they're looking to reimburse and secure the infrastructure in these communities to be able to respond to that. And so this was based, this grant application will be based off of that and the replacement of fire stations 2 and 3 with regard to that and their seismic needs and upgrades as the primary projects underneath of that. At this point, we have not submitted other than just what they called a pre-application, and that was sent to the state just to make sure that we the project scope fell within the criteria. They had sent us back in end of September, first part of October, probably, that we did qualify for that and that we can now submit as a sub-applicant. The due date on this is November 16th. The grant is all filled out. I have not submitted it yet. I wanted to have a chance to have a quick discussion with the council through the Public Safety Committee, see if there's any concerns and see if we want to go ahead and file that grant away. With that, that's a brief overview of that. I'm happy to answer questions for the council with regards to this.
Any questions for Chief on this funding opportunity? Again, there would be a 25% match, but it's better than 100% paying out. So
yeah, so to me, it sounds like this falls right in line with the projects we've talked about for stations 2 and 3, and we've talked about some different funding sources, which we'll probably make some more decisions on after the first of the year. But if we only have to match 25% versus 100%, I think we need to move forward with it, definitely.
Any other concerns from council about submitting for this? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the scope of the proposal. Would it be simply the seismic retrofit portions of 2 and 3?
So what I put in for in the application and defining that is, I put it as the seismic retrofit, but it would incorporate all of the whole entire project that that had been outlined in the needs assessment, redoing it for the safety and health. In the application, they have a primary concern that you're mitigating, and then you're allowed to list what your secondary pieces of that. And some of that is mitigation retrofit for other health hazards and making it safety-wise. So all of that would probably fall underneath of that, but the primary that we wanted to focus on was the seismic piece of that. And even, again, my look on this, council member, was more, even if that was the only portion that they were willing to fund, was that part that's outlined in our plan, at least that's, it's better than none of it. So
I think I was asking about sort of competitiveness and maybe what the advice from the state is, because if you're including both 2 and 3 and the full projects for both 2 and 3, what is that, like $10 million? Which is within the range of what's possible. But you take, 500 million divided across the country, there's, doesn't go very far. So, but it sounds like we're happy with the whole thing going forward, and it's up to you to figure out what's most competitive. So.
Yeah, and in the application I put in, I think the total was 7 million, sorry, not 700 million, 7 million. And that was to encompass the construction cost along with the soft costs associated with design and engineering. Any of the furniture or those pieces, I left those out of those costing. Again, in doing some other grants, it's always better to kind of put in the whole total and let them tell you they're only willing to fund a certain portion of that, because as you're saying, there's only so many dollars that can go around to be able to fund that. They do have some criteria they use that our project does fit into. It's an infrastructure project. It's mitigating risk to one or more lifelines. It's adopting of mandatory building codes, which we've done. We've got a building code effectiveness grading system. So we're meeting all of those kind of criteria that the state is initially going to look at. And then for the national piece of that, they have a few other areas of risk reduction, future conditions, population impacted, and so forth, that would go under that bigger chunk of money that might be available under the national competition.
Okay. Sounds like a great opportunity. Thanks to Chief for finding these funding sources. So hopefully we're successful. Okay. There's no other questions for Chief Bryce. We'll move on to Chief Kamak, and he has a staffing and operations update. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I've noticed that my internet here has kind of popped a couple times, so I hope that I stay with you through this. If I don't, you can abandon me and move on to more important things. So I just wanted to give you an update on some staffing related issues where we're at, as well as just some operational touches on some certain areas. So we still have police officers this is also an advertisement for everybody in the community that if you'd like to apply, we are taking applications. In addition to the vacancies that we do have one individual on long-term military leave. Left us here recently, will be out through most of next year serving his country. So that's not a vacancy that we can fill, but we have to adjust to that impact. The good news is we have a conditional offer of employment out to one candidate, and she's going through 2 more of the steps, and then we ground on another candidate. So interview set up with myself and the mayor, and then a couple of remaining hiring steps, and perhaps we'll be able to talk about new hires at our next meeting. In addition to that, we were taking a look at some of the processes that we do to attract lateral candidates and looking to see if we can make some competitive adjustments there. So I don't have anything to speak specifically on yet tonight, but I'm taking that with our civil service examiner, Aaron Cater, and then back to civil service. And if we can work through that, we might be able to have some ways to be a little bit more attractive to lateral candidates, and also take a look at another opportunity that's out there that they call an exceptional hiring, which means that candidates who may have gone through a formal hiring process with an agency, actually graduated from the academy, but then for whatever reason didn't go on either to independent status. Those could be through layoffs, those could be through performance. There's a variety of reasons, but it's another area that agencies have found some success, at least in looking at candidates, and hopefully maybe we could draw from. So we're looking at that as well. We currently have a promotions process for sergeant underway. It opened here 2 weeks ago, and then the testing will occur in December. And then we're looking at holding a promotions process for lieutenant in the first quarter of 2021. And then from there, trying to make selections and appointments, and then backfill some of our openings. This is a really important aspect for us, especially right now. The department usually operates with chief and 3 lieutenants. This year we've operated with a chief and 2 lieutenants. And this year we actually operated with a chief and 1 lieutenant, because the first half of the year, 1 lieutenant was out on medical, and the second half of the year, another lieutenant's been out on medical. So I'm a jack of all trades and master of only a few of them. So it's important. And then, we will have retirements in 2021, certainly. So we're challenged there. On the records hiring front that you approved, we've been working through candidates there. We currently have a candidate that's that's going to move into the background process, and we're hopeful that that one can move through to success, and maybe we can see a hiring there in possibly December. And that would be timely as well, because as courts are opening back up, that workload hasn't gone away, and nor have all the other things that have come our way as our records department goes. Just some operating tidbits for you, just some adjustments that have been made as a result of COVID. So up in Colshan Creek, Officer Serrano has had a really healthy youth program up there, but obviously with gathering restrictions and things, he's been unable to have the traditional field trips and outings. So they did something creative with the neighborhood team that he works with on this, and they created a nature bag scavenger hunt. And so what's done there is they're given a list, and then the kids can go out with their families, and if they complete the scavenger hunt, they snap a picture with their collected items, and they send that back to Officer Serrano, and then they're awarded a $10 gift card to Dairy Queen. And so there was 41 bags handed out here recently for the fall one, and they're planning another one for December. So that's been really successful there. On the school resource side, obviously school has been online, so it's caused us to have to adjust our school policing and how we do that. So our middle school and high school resource officers are both kind of split between day and afternoon, evening hours, and they're dividing time between school focus and patrol coverage that's there. On the daytime front, mainly with our middle school program, just to give you an idea of some of the things they're doing there, is Mount Baker Middle School and LaVenture Middle School. They hand out about 300 to 350 lunches in a day. So our resource officers are showing up to those locations, and they're great, just informal settings. Kids know they'll be there. The officers are there, and that they can touch base with kids and families, and it works out really well. Officer Gerondale at the middle school has been working with the Bilingual Advocate in a student leadership group. This is a program that they had going before they went out on COVID, and they meet every Monday afternoon in virtual meetings and still conduct discussions and activities and try to put things together for the kids as well. And they're also looking at ways to do maybe some future community service projects. Officer Gerondale also does home visits. He coordinates those with the schools. So the schools try to exhaust all their means first when they're having touch base issues with kids. And when they can't, they reach out to the school resource officer, and then they follow through and make those visits as well. One of the things John's been really impressed with that he shared with me was just how attentive the schools have been under this COVID environment, being responsive to kids and families and technology issues. And I can't imagine what a struggle that is, just knowing what it is for us. One of the things, I guess, we talk a lot about the negative impacts of COVID, but there are some undiscovered opportunities, especially on the school side of things. The traditional model is, schools host events to bring families and children to the school sites. And COVID's provided an opportunity to take the school events to the neighborhoods, if you will. So two of the programs that the school resource officers work with staff on, one at LaVenture is called Check and Connect. And then there was one at Mount Baker School called Meet, Greet, and Eat. And this is where the SRO, a school administrator, school counselors, the bilingual advocates, the Gear Up and College Bound program coordinators and securities, they take an organized activity, school-based, out to a neighborhood of LaVenture students, a neighborhood of Mount Baker students, and make those connections and things happen, which is, I think it's a really cool thing to have had happen as an outcome from something that was, again, the pandemic, which is sometimes negative. The advantage here, I think, that the SRO provides is identifying neighborhoods, identifying safe and comfortable locations in those neighborhoods, and then assisting with security and things like that as they're needed. On the outreach front, in Erin's world, just to give you a quick highlights of some of the things that have been going on there. She's had 44 contacts this year with new people. She's had 500 contacts with or on behalf of people without homes. She's had 4 substance use referrals, 3 mental health referrals, and 2 have returned home. In addition to that, she has an intern that's going to be starting the first week in November, who is from Boston University. Boston University is one of 55 online schools currently offering masters in social work. So that person is coming on board and will help with her workload. And then they're reviewing contracts for 2 other intern prospects. This fall, we substituted the traditional a winter coat drive that we do here because there's other service clubs that do coat drives, and we did it with a program called Helping Hands or a Hands Up Experience. And these have been fundraiser opportunities that go directly to our embedded social work. As of the other day, she had raised $6,000, and I saw a check come in from someone we know for another $1,000 on top of that. So it's been really successful so far, and that will go to very healthy and helping things for sure. As you saw a few weeks ago in the paper, Skagit County Sheriff's Department has teamed up with Compass Mental Health under their mental health team, or MCOT. MCOT has been in place for all of our agencies for a while under a little bit different model. But we've had several incidences recently where we've been able to call on the deputy who has the mental health provider in that vehicle. And it's been very helpful in our cases to mitigate and work with those situations, do some diffusing. Probably more importantly, a recent one, it helped the family of the person that was in the mental health crisis, better understand the services. So that's been a great tool, and compliments to Sheriff McDermott and his team for that. And then last, I'll just finish some recent professional development training topics that we've done here. We have our officers, as part of their firearms training program, they go through a judgment shooting simulator. And today was the last day where they finished up with all of our staff for this round. So that was good and successful. So all of our folks have been through that. And then Sergeant Ben Green teaches our fair and impartial policing training. And he has a class scheduled, I believe it's actually tomorrow is one he's doing. And so we'll have about a dozen of our folks socially distanced that will go through and complete that training as well. So those are just some of the things that are going on or are going forward at this point.
Okay, questions for Chief Kamek?
I have one, just a real quick one, Chris.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that the co-op did a recent 4% Friday for Aaron. Have you gotten any numbers on that yet?
2,500 is what I heard was raised just on that one Friday alone.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm glad you asked that because I had a note to say that and I missed it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Chris? Okay, thanks so much. Thanks, Chris. All right, moving on to item B tonight. It's our city council member vacancy process discussion. And thanks again for Mayor Pro Tem Councilmember Beaton and Councilmember Carrillas for sitting down and making a proposal to council. Hopefully you had a chance to go through your packets and check out the information there. So this is just a time to kind of ask staff for some direction from council on how we'd like to proceed. We could take it maybe section by section. So there was an application in the packet. Does anyone have any thoughts about that application or changes?
Is it any different than the application we did when we actually added Aaron when Joe left?
The only difference is we added the question, is there anything in your background that would attract heightened scrutiny if undisclosed and later discovered? And then we added information about the PDC F1, the personal financial affairs statement that would be required. I think that's the only difference.
Great.
If I can remember.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If there aren't any changes or additions, we're happy to use that then. Okay. Then the council also received sort of the packet of information that would go with the application to any prospective folks. So that includes a ward map. So that would be important to make sure the applicants realize they live in Ward 1. Information about the F1 statement from the PDC. So that way folks are really upfront with seeing what they would need to file. The City Council chapter of our Mount Vernon Municipal Code is copied in the packet. And then we also added from the Association of Washington Cities Council Member Handbook, the chapter about the job of the council member. So I thought that was great information to be able to share. And then I think that was it in the packet. Anything else additional that you think would be important to include in the packet?
So I looked over the packet and I thought it was a great job by the committee and by staff putting this together. I think it's probably the most thorough packet we've had since we've had to go through this process, and I have no additions to make to it.
Okay.
I would agree. I thought it was a great job. In fact, it was kind of nice to read through some of the things that you kind of forget about being a council member and just kind of renewing what our obligations are and whatnot. So I think it's great.
Good.
I would agree also. I think it's fantastic and a lot of good information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the other thing we proposed was a potential timeline. And so, it's completely up to the council. We have until just for first part of January to fill the position. And so what would you like to do as far as the timeline goes? We could publish this announcement next week sometime, leave it open. Having Thanksgiving kind of puts a wrench in some of the meetings there. But we could review any applications in executive session on December 9, and the council would instruct who you would like to invite for interviews.
Yeah, I would like to see if we couldn't fill the position by January 1, if possible. So if we were to do the interviews and make a decision in late December, that would fall right in line.
Okay.
I agree.
I agree too. All those interviews will be done by Zoom.
Well, the
Or
governor's order at this point goes through, I think it's the 8th or 9th, forgot exactly. So if the order is renewed, then yes, it would be through Zoom. If the order is not renewed and it's modified to allow some sort of in-person something, we could do that. It's all kind of up to the governor's orders at that point.
Okay.
So my question on the timeline, I agree that it'd be nice to be done by the date mentioned, is whether or not 2 weeks is enough notice. The nice thing about currently is that there was an article in the paper. People have known this is coming for a while. I'm not too worried about 2 weeks this time per se, but I do wonder if that's enough time generally for people to fill in not just fill in the application, but to talk amongst family, to talk to other folks, city councilors, others, find out what the job is, etc.
It can be, each time there's a vacancy, council can give different direction. This wouldn't be codified. It's simply just a process for us at this point. Kind of just that foundation to write it down. But it's up to council.
Yeah, well, this time 2 weeks seems fine to me. I mean, it's been in the paper. So, and if it's not codified or written down, then I don't think I have any concerns about it.
The only concern I would have is if we don't have enough recruitment. Then if we just have maybe 1 or 2, then probably, I don't know if the time is too short to recruit or look for
So I would think if that was the case, then council could reject the applicants and go through the process another time.
We could also start the process and publish that applications will first be reviewed on November 23rd. And that could give you time to extend more time if you would like to, or simply go ahead and review and close applications on the 23rd.
I think I'd like basically what you've just said, Jill, is go ahead and get this
First
process
review.
started. And then if we need to extend it because of lack of applications, that we afford us the ability to do that.
And I'm perfectly good with that.
Okay. So if we went ahead and published this next week on November 9, we would start distributing the applications for council to take a look at on November 23rd. That is the week of Thanksgiving, which is another topic I'll ask about if we're meeting then. And then the next meeting would be December 9. And again, we would review that and give direction on who you'd like to interview. Then we would have interviews on December 16. And then council can decide that evening, you can come back and do it, but the 16th would be the date for the interviews, which is what we would also put on the application. So those that are applying could anticipate a date. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So I would move the council adopt the process that's been laid out in agenda item B.
I'll second.
A motion by Mark and a second by Melissa.
There-
I'll make a
ahead.
note that we will add November 23rd as the first review of applications. So that leaves us more time with that exception or no change. Does that sound okay?
Hey, Jill, I got one more question.
Yeah.
Can we do those interviews and have it just be the person, or does that have to be kind of like last time where it's open to, because it just didn't, to me, it didn't seem fair that the other candidates got to listen to all the questions before and all that, but, or is that just law?
It's the law. It's RCW.
Okay.
They have to be conducted in an open public meeting.
Okay.
Now we can make sure
Um,
that the best way we could do it is everyone gets the same question. I mean, like they all have this question from each of you, right? Those can be rotated. I don't know, kind of like a forum. But then there is the question and answer time where you can ask anything you want of the particular candidate. But because it's required in law, we can't get around it.
Okay.
Could they get the questions ahead of time? So that what I'm saying is, like Gary said, last time it was uncomfortable because everyone knew what the questions were and the last person was ready to go with all her answers before we even asked the questions, basically. So if they have the questions ahead of time, at least they know what we're going to ask. There's no surprise, but we could have extra questions that we have up our own.
We could, if you'd like to do that, or it could be we could do it instead of one at a time, like the full interview one at a time. You could do it a little bit more like a forum where one person starts, and we kind of alter. I'm just trying to throw out ideas for you.
That's a good idea too.
I just have one question. Then we just have 2 weeks for these applications fill out. Just 2 weeks from today until November 23rd.
We would put it out on the 9th, so Monday the 9th, or actually if we kind of got it together, we could put it out maybe Friday, no later than Monday. And then the first review of the applications would be, yes, November 23rd.
Okay.
Okay. As far as the interviews go, we can kind of continue to think about how you want to do that. And then when we come to the 9th, when you decide who you'd like to invite for interviews, all or one or however that works, we can finalize how we're going to conduct the interview. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a section, if I can ask one more
Sure.
question. There was a section in the back, the filling council vacancies. I think this is just kind of procedure, not code, right? Or is this?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was
And
written out
then-
for procedure.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you. This is just really nice to have it all documented. Thanks again for the team. Section C, start with 6 on the second page there. Says the city council may hold an executive session to discuss which applicants they wish to conduct interviews with. And so that's at our discretion. That could be done executive session or it could be done in open session.
Sure. They
Yeah.
specifically state that you can do that in executive session to discuss qualifications of the applicants.
It might be good to clarify, we could do that either. And then it says that advise the mayor's office of whom they would invite to public interviews. And so just the word would seems like it'd be better that who is deciding? It's the council, right? Who's deciding who the interviewees are.
Correct.
And so it seems like, just to be a little clearer, that it's the council's decision who the interviewees are.
So change the word they to council, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and is the wood seems a little passive. There's a lot of shalls and such in here, and this one was wood, and so that's another reason it occurred to me. So it's just not clear that it's the city council's responsibility to pick the applicants to interview. Um, and then number 4, it says the mayor's office shall prepare an application form which requests appropriate. And then I know what you did this time, working with Iris and Melissa, council members Beaton and Curious. You did that in coordination with the city council. So number 4, we might want to insert the mayor's office shall, in coordination with city council, prepare an application form.
So we're not codifying this. This is just
Yeah.
the process that we're going to go through this time. If we wanted to codify it, it might be worth getting into the details a little more. But I think we're all pretty clear on what the intent is of this this process.
So where would this document live then, or does it not?
It's the mayor's office.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's a vacancy, we kind of whip it out like, okay,
Yeah.
this is our general direction. And then
Yeah.
we check with council on how you want to do it.
Yeah. So it's not codified, but it's procedure. So it's in the packet. You asked me to review it. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you so much. We will get that going, and we'll see if we can get that out by Friday, if not Monday, and we'll make sure we send links to information to council so you can forward it to anyone that you may talk with who has an interest in applying. So, okay, great. Thank you. Item C tonight is the Water and Sewer Revenue Refunding Bond of 2020, and our Finance Director, Doug Valesky, is here to present. Doug, and we have a guest with us.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. We've talked about this in the past and got your approval to move forward on it. So tonight, we're recommending that council adopt an ordinance allowing for the issuance of water and sewer revenue refunding bonds of the city in the principal amount not to exceed $9.1 million for the purpose of refunding outstanding bond obligations for the wastewater utility. The city currently has a principal amount outstanding of just over $8.8 million on our Department of Ecology State Revolving Loan Fund issued for the upgrade of the city's wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The original principal amount of this loan was $16.9 million with an interest rate of 2.6%, and it allows for a prepayment option for any date upon prior notice. Due to the current economic market, it is estimated that the city could realize about $600,000 of net savings over the remaining term of the loan through 2029 if we refunded this loan with current lower rates. The city has been working with our bond counsel, Cynthia Weed, with K&L Gates, and our financial advisor, Dave Traegersurf, who's a manager director of local government finance with D.A. Davidson and Company, on the presentation of this refinancing. I personally just want to thank Cynthia and Dave for the invaluable help and the guidance that they've done with this. If you've seen the very small ordinance that's attached and read that, that's great work done by Cynthia. And Cynthia has joined us tonight to answer any questions you might have. I don't know, Cynthia, if there's anything you would like to add.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Cynthia Weed. I'm with K&L Gates, and we act as your bond attorney. That is the attorney for the city when you borrow money. Unlike your general municipal attorney who has to know everything about the city, our role is strictly to provide advice and counsel in connection with your borrowing of money. I can go through the first thing you're going to say is, how could a lawyer make something as simple as just refinancing a DOE loan into a 60-page ordinance? But it's double-spaced, mind you. It's actually double-spaced, and in big font, as opposed to insurance contracts. And so I want to assure you that you have no outstanding bonds like these bonds. Most of the time when you borrow money, you pledge your full faith and credit. And in this case, you're only pledging your revenues from the utilities. And so that's the reason this ordinance is set up the way it is. most of the provisions in here are not necessarily required for this bond issue. But when you issue revenue bonds, then they're payable only from revenues. And then you have to set up a mechanism where you have operating covenants and you have to deal with how you're going to deal with borrowing in the future. So the lenders, even though you're paying only from revenues, they don't get a mortgage on your utility. They are counting on your operating covenants. And that's the reason we set this up as it is. I would like to point out one thing, and that is, and this is a typical procedure for Washington utilities. The bonds are being issued to refund a wastewater treatment bond issue. And that was the DOE loan. If you were to go to the market in the future, it is very typical in Washington, the state of Washington, to do strictly for security purposes, to do a cross pledge. And that makes your bonds more attractive to investors, which means that for purposes of securing these bonds, you're pledging both your wastewater revenues as well as your water revenues. Now, that's only for credit purposes. In fact, Washington law prohibits you from actually having your water system support the wastewater system and vice versa. So this just makes your utility more attractive. And this cross pledge only affects the size of the credit pool that's is able to secure this bond issue. So, and in effect, you really have a stronger utility if you can pledge both those sewer revenues as well as the water revenues. But again, for rate purposes, you will always have to assure, because it's state law, that you can't set the rate so that your water system benefits the sewer system for rates and vice versa. There are other provisions in here, rate covenants, operating covenants, et cetera, simply to protect the investors, because they don't get a mortgage on your utility, and frankly, they wouldn't want it anyway. They're really looking for revenue. So the covenants that are in there are simply safeguards for the protection of your potential investors. The banker in this transaction, which is D.A. Davidson, is giving you the opportunity to either go straight to a bank and just get a loan. But right now it's looking very positive that you'll probably do a public offering of securities. And finally, the process. I just want to let you know that it used to be when you sold bonds, you knew what the interest rate was right at the night you adopted this ordinance. It has become much more typical these days because of where the markets are, that this is a delegation resolution, which means that this ordinance actually delegates to the mayor and the finance director the ability to monitor the sale and accept a potential interest rate subject to parameters. And those parameters really drive around that savings target. So you won't issue these bonds unless you meet these minimum parameters that are set forth in this ordinance. And those parameters are very clear. You have to have a 4% saving. And I think certainly given where the markets are even today, after all of this, it appears that you could be on the road to realizing a very substantial amount of savings and able to manage this overall process. And there's a time limit to the delegation. Even though it goes out to 2021, the expectation is this will be done, if not before the end of this year, then it would be done next year. But that's something that Doug and the mayor will be looking at. And of course, when the whole bond issue is done, they'll be back with a report about how much money they've saved the city of Mount Vernon. I really love talking about bonds. As you might know or see, I really like talking about them more than you like listening to me talk about them. But if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to answer. Please feel free to ask.
Okay, Doug, any more to add before I ask council if they have any questions?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Questions for City Council or from City Council?
No, I know a lot of municipalities are looking at their current bonds and their current rates, and they're doing a refinance on it. And I think this is a wise decision. I think Doug indicated we'd save about 960,000. Is that correct?
I said around 600,000 is what we were.
Well, let's stretch that out a little bit.
Whatever you say, Mark.
My question might be naive. We have an outstanding principal amount of 8.8 million, yet we're being asked to approve this new purchase for a principal amount not to exceed 9.1 million. What's the difference?
And again, what this does is take into account the price that the bonds might be sold for. Keep in mind, even though it may look like you're borrowing more money to pay off a debt, and we really expect it to be significantly less. That's a fairly wide margin given potential costs. We're not going to have a reserve account or anything along those lines. But even though it may appear like, why am I going to pay 8.9 million off with something that looks like is 9.1? That really has to do with the overall structure of the financing. Overall, your debt service goes down. So when we do refundings, oftentimes we have to actually issue more principal, even though the interest rate is lower. And so net, you really won't be more indebted. You actually will have lower debt service coverage. There's nothing sneaky in that. And by the way, when Doug said, what are our savings? The savings take into account all the costs associated with doing this.
Right.
So it's not so when we have these net savings, that means it's after you pay the costs of doing this. So you're not doing it just to pay lawyers and bankers, et cetera. So that all gets put in there so that this is a true savings to the city.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can't we have more questions?
No, that was my question. I'm glad Richard asked it because can't we have more questions? I'm like, no. No, I'm glad Richard asked that question because I was like, are there fees associated? Is there something else in there that we need to take care of? So thank you for that explanation.
So this, if council would like to take action and move on forward on this, it would be an ordinance. It'd be 3815 as presented in your packet.
I would move to approve ordinance. Say the number again, I'm sorry.
3815.
3815, I usually write it down.
Second.
All right, motion by Mary and a second by Gary. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Right, any opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you. And thank you to Doug and Cynthia for working on this and saving us some money. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you, Cynthia.
Wish I could
Thanks,
be there
Cynthia.
in person. Wish I could be there in person.
All right. Moving on then. So item D tonight is our 2021 continued preliminary budget discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug to lead the way. Doug.
All right, I am trying to share my screen. Do you see the calendar up there? Okay, good. All right. Again, just to review our calendar, I know I do this every time and kind of get boring, but just want to make sure everybody's aware of where we are. So last time on October 28th, we did not set the property tax levy, but we did have a public hearing on all of our revenues, including talking about the property tax revenues. And then on November 2nd, copies of preliminary budget were made available to the public. And tonight, and then also on November 4th, so tonight, and then also on the 11th, there was, I should say today, not tonight, we did publish notice of filing of the preliminary budget and a notice of the public hearing for the final budget. So those notices have gone out. And so tonight I'm just going to talk about a little about where we are again right now. Just a reminder, and take any more questions. The directors are all online too to help answer any questions we may have. And then I'm hoping that next Thursday, not Wednesday, because Wednesday is a holiday, but next Thursday we are going to be holding our public hearing on the 2021 budget, and then hopefully we may adopt the budget and then the property tax levy. So any questions on that? And I'm going to stop the share there, but that I am going to share and move to something else here. Okay. So just kind of a reminder of where we were. I know this is a spreadsheet, the thing that I worked on the last few budgets with council members about where we were and any kind of adjustments or anything that we can do. Just a reminder, this is for the expense, for the revenues, our 2021 preliminary budget. Trying to move down here. We did in our preliminary budget have $69,889,986 in projected revenues. I am asking to make an adjustment of an increase of $10,190, and that's the adjustment for the final assessment values from the county for the property tax. And what that entails is, you remember, I budgeted $100,000 for new construction, and we only received $88,288. But then I did not fund anything for refunds, and we received $21,902 in refunds. So the net effect is an increase of our projected revenue to by $10,190 there we go, in the general fund. So if council would agree with that, then our new budgeted revenue, whoa, I went a little too far here, will be $69,900,176. So that's just that $10,000 increase. On the expense side, our budget for 2021 is $71,172,319 in our preliminary budget. I would like to increase, or the city would like to increase in the Parks and Enrichment Fund, $2,997. If you remember, there was a reorganization that Director Berner proposed for reclassification of some of her positions that netted some savings. This particular position was not included in the preliminary budget. It came in a little later, so we would like to add that. And what it is, it's a reclassification request in the parks from their current accounting tech to a senior administrative assistant to bring her more in line with the duties that she performs. And again, this is part of the reorganization plan, which it'll still realize over $33,000 in annual savings. So with that adjustment in here, then the new budget would be $71,175,316. So what that means, just looking at our fund balance reconciliation, it actually brings that revenue at $10,000 actually brings our fund reserve down by $10,000. In the general fund, and we'd be using $360,000 in reserves. And then, as you can see over here, we'd still be at 17% of our general fund, and our policy is at 15. And then the streets, parks, and library, all our policy is 10% at a minimum, trying to move that up to 15, and they would all be around 16%. So those are the only changes that the city has, and I haven't heard of any other changes that have come from council at this point. So with that, I am open, and as well as any directors, to any questions you might have on the 2021 preliminary budget.
Any questions from council?
No, I think we've pretty well gone over the budget. The questions I've had, Doug's been able to answer kind of one-on-one. There was a couple things I had with the fire department, but those questions were answered, and it was due to some slowdowns that we had in ambulance transportation during the height of the COVID. So those questions have been answered on the revenue side of things. So I'm satisfied with what I've seen throughout the process.
Yeah, I am. If you would have told me back in April, May that we'd be sitting in this position, I mean, I think this is some of these little adjustments. I mean, that's just basic math and cleaning things up a little bit. But yeah, I'm good to go on it.
I just want to take 2 seconds just to say that, I echo what Gary is saying. When we think about where we were sitting back in April and then looking forward and this is what we're doing now, it would have been very easy for staff to put this budget forward and include the 1% tax increase and ask us to consider that. But staff did not do that. And I just want to say thank you very much. I think a few of us on council had indicated early on that we weren't comfortable with that. And certainly everyone that knows me knows that that's probably one of the hardest decisions I make each year with the budget process is trying to, weighing the pros and cons of increasing taxes. So thank you very much for making that decision for me and for council much easier. I really do appreciate it. I think you guys have done a great job.
Thank you.
I will second all of them. I think this is fantastic. And I told Jill the other day, I said, I never dreamed that it would be this. I really thought, like Melissa said, it was going to be a battle. It was going to be really hard to do this year.
Mhm.
And so I'm delighted that it hasn't been, and it's a very clean budget, a clean and lean budget. And it thank you very much for all the work that the directors put in and the mayor and Doug. I really appreciate the hard work that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for your work.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And I know the directors that are on. I'm sure they appreciate your comments as well, council. So I think Doug and I were talking about our next steps would be. It sounds like we'll be presenting the budget on. Remember, next Thursday, not Wednesday, Thursday. And then we'll provide an ordinance and all of that so that you may take action next Thursday.
So actually, there's going to be 2 ordinances, one for the budget and then one for the levy. So,
okay. All righty. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Item E tonight is for the good of the order. I think just a couple things I was going to share with council, and Jennifer Bernard, Parks Director, is on, just to correct me if I say this wrong. We have looked at, we made some major decisions in parks, as all of you know, this year, and closed Bakerview for most of the year. And then Jennifer and staff have really assessed, and they'll be opening the gates at Bakerview starting on Monday. Park usage is going to, of course, be down in the evening, so we think we can manage just the impact with the staff, since we still are short with staff, but we think it makes sense now. So just FYI, that'll be open on Monday. I'd like to, don't have to decide tonight, but I wanted to have council take a look at the rest of November. We've got the 12th, which is the Thursday, which will be next week, the 16th, and then the 24th by code on the week of Thanksgiving. If council meets, they would meet on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And so just think about if we want to meet. I don't anticipate there's any major items to meet for, but if we decide not to meet, I think you have to make a motion to not meet on that day. So we can discuss kind of maybe the rest of the year's sort of calendar of agenda items that we can foresee next week and kind of make some decisions on that. Does that sound okay between now and the end of the year? There's not that many Wednesdays left. So, and then just a couple of things I wanted to mention. I sent just right before we started our meeting some slides that were presented by Jennifer Johnson with Public Health at our briefing this morning. Really good presentation with kind of a synopsis of a lot of data that has happened since the beginning of the pandemic. And so I thought you'd really find that interesting. So you'll see those in your council email, links to that information. One of the things that she stressed today was that we had 35 cases over the weekend and an additional 23 on Monday. So we're going to be hitting the high risk activity level in our county due to those numbers. 40% of the positive cases in October were from social gatherings. And so messaging around the holidays coming up is really crucial for folks. We know that they're going to gather, and we just hope that folks will gather as safe as possible, because we are seeing those numbers going up quite a bit from social interactions. So with that being said, if there's any questions on the slides, I'm sure Jennifer would be available to answer questions, but I thought they're pretty self-explanatory. I think you'll enjoy them. One thing that we are going to be doing for our city employees, and now that I'm looking at all of you, maybe I'll have to do that for you. We're going to do a COVID prevention bag for them to take home before Thanksgiving. And so a box of masks, a hand sanitizer, and a checklist from Public Health on things to think about before you invite people over and have social gatherings for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so we're putting those together for staff. I will get one to each of you. And I shared that with the Mount Vernon Leadership Group. I think the port and the school district and the hospital might look at doing the same kind of thing. Just a way to remind our staff about keep safe, just like everyone else. So, and that's all I had for the good of the order. Is there anyone else that had anything to talk about? Okay. Well, we all have other data to check, I'm sure, at this point, so we can excuse ourselves from our meeting. We've concluded our regularly scheduled agenda items. I'm sorry, Kevin. I was way too anxious. Is there a need for an executive session?
Yes, I'm sorry to have to do that, but we do need to enter into an executive session to discuss with legal counsel enforcement action, litigation, or potential litigation to which the city, the governing body, or a member acting in their official capacity is or is likely to become a party, when public knowledge regarding such discussion would likely result in either legal or financial adverse consequence to the city. 30 minutes.
Okay, with that then we'll be adjourned into an executive session, and we'll wait for TV 10 to let us know that we're clear for a conversation. Thank you.